Hey guys, sorry for the bad editing, so I re-edit chapter and please do subscribe. Comment for more what if and please do subscribe and like. Chapter 8. Stray Hunt Part 2. Limits. How odd. The last thing I recall before everything went dark was jumping in front of Saji to protect him. I clearly remember I was in that old underground tunnel where we encountered that stray devil, but the place I found myself currently in was very different from what I recall. There was only one word that came to my mind when describing this place. Hell. A sea of flames swirling everywhere, dancing violently as if trying to keep any poor souls from escaping its fiery clutches. A thick layer of smoke was covering the area. It felt so hot and heavy that it threatened to suffocate a person by simply staying near it. The road, the bodies, and the scattered debris all around were searing hot. Steam rose from them, almost burning my skin just due to being too close to them. I saw hell. All around there were charred bodies everywhere. The corpses were blacker than a moonless night. All horribly scorched by the flames, many of them crumbling to pieces, and others were missing different body parts like legs or arms. I saw hell. The corpses that weren't burned to a crisp were perhaps even harder to look at. Faces seared by flames beyond recognition, very few of them retaining any skin, the blistering hot bones usually hidden beneath the flesh stuck out now visible for the whole world to see it. I saw hell. The mixed smell of various burnt parts of the body spread throughout air. The stench of it all made the insides lurch in disgust. The contents of my stomach felt like they would rush out at any moment as I breathed in this death-tainted scent. The screams of the still living people trapped under the debris, the cries of those caught writhing in the flames as they were burned alive, the pleas and curses of the victims mixed together, and all of them were desperately praying, begging for help, for salvation. But all of it was in vain, for none arrived. What I was witnessing now was something that shouldn't exist, it was something too cruel to be real. A horrific image ripped straight out from some dark deranged hellish nightmare. Somewhere along the way, rain started pouring down. Water appeared as if it were trying to save some of the poor souls by putting out this horrific inferno. It wasn't enough, however, to completely extinguish the flames, it only served to make things look grimmer and more somber. Blood, ashes, and dirt mixing together with the water, flowing and forming messy puddles, filling whatever cracks they could find. Most people would have found the present scenery a core-shaking image, but what truly grabbed my attention was a person laying in the middle of it all. A single boy, he appeared to be no older than 7 or 8 years old. His ash-covered body laid lifelessly on the smoldering ground, the pieces of debris half covering him, his empty eyes staring at the smoke-filled night sky, yet his small weak hand was reaching out to it. The moment I saw his eyes I experienced the most contradicting image I have ever seen in my entire life. His eyes looked dull, weak, and void of any emotion, yet there was still life in them. His body should have been dead, I could see that there was no more strength in him, but he was still alive. This person should be by all accounts dead, but even so there is still life in him. Though, perhaps I am looking at things the wrong way as I stared at the child before me. The flesh and blood body are still alive, but the inside of it had broken down. It was still in one piece, however the mechanism that once made it work has snapped and stopped functioning. The person inside the body was already dead, like he just gave up trying to live anymore. As if the soul inside of it died before the heart gave its last beat. The more I looked into his lifeless amber eyes, the more I felt a strange sense of familiarity from him. I felt my insides grow cold as I stared into the child's eyes peeking through his auburn bangs, feeling like I was staring into an old broken mirror. That child was me. I felt a burning sensation circulated through my being. A quick spasm made my body shake and tremble uncontrollably. My eyes thrashed in pain as I tried opening them. What I was greeted with when I regained consciousness was the worried expression of my junior and fellow pawn Nomura Ruruko. However, what was she holding me in her arms for? My chest throbbed violently. I convulsed as I remembered what happened to me, the feeling of cold steel slashing through my flesh. I tried to pick myself up, only to spasm once again from the throbbing pain in my chest. Take it easy, Emiya-senpai. The wound you received was very deep and it only just healed. The twin-tailed pawn explained as she helped me pick myself up. I started to feel bad for her since my body was so much larger than hers, I could only hope that she didn't have too difficult a time carrying me around. While I'm not exactly a heavy person, I doubt that a girl with her frame and stature could easily carry a guy my size. Slowly I regained more control of my body and my thoughts became more coherent. This made me wonder what had happened after I blacked out. I rubbed my forehead to try and rid myself of the slight headache I was feeling. How long was I out? You were out 2 or 3 minutes at most. You suddenly passed out when he cut you, perhaps from the sudden shock, but you're fine now. She explained to me in a worried tone, her eyes filled with concern. I checked the area where I was slashed. There was no longer any wound there, just a deep accentuated scar. This made me recall one of my previous little study sessions with my master. It must have been some form of healing magic that saved me. That was the only answer that came to mind, yet something didn't seem right. Why is the wound already healed? Don't devil healing techniques or spells take time to treat deep wounds? It didn't make sense. There's no way I could have been healed so fast, and I don't recall anyone possessing such potent healing abilities in our peerage. You know about Phoenix Tears, right? She raised her hand and showed me a small red vial. Well, Kaichu prefers being prepared for unexpected events like this, and she always carries one with her just in case someone gets lethally injured during the hunts. Oh, that made sense. From what I remember, Phoenix Tears are a very potent healing item, one being strong enough to heal even a gaping hole in the chest in a matter of seconds. But as strong as they are, they also happen to be expensive, and I mean very, very expensive. Yes, that explains it. I narrowed my eyes while looking at my surroundings. We were no longer in the room where Kuroseiga first appeared. Presently we were in one of the other tunnels we explored earlier. What's going on? Why are we here? I asked my fellow pawn. What happened after I passed out? Nomura took a second and cleared her throat, not appearing to enjoy what she was about to say. After you passed out, Kaichu couldn't afford keeping you around in that state, it was just too risky. Protecting you would have been too difficult since everyone was required to fight against the stray devil. She passed me the Phoenix Tear and ordered me to take you to safety. It was her only choice at the moment. It made sense actually. From her reaction when she first saw Kuroseiga, I could tell that she was scared. Her ordering is to teleport away, and failing that, her command to retreat when the opportunity presented itself only served to prove my theory. My eyes landed on Nomura's shoulder and how it looked unusually down compared to her opposite one. I bit my lip as I realized that her shoulder wasn't like that because she was holding it that way, but because it was dislocated. Kuroseiga must have attacked her when she tried to take me to safety. Damn, if only we could have teleported away, this whole situation wouldn't have happened. The fact that I couldn't even react properly really must have screwed up any backup plan Kaichu had. By passing out, I only made myself a target to the enemy and a liability to my teammates. Even if someone was selected to protect me, it wouldn't have been a good choice as I could have accidentally gotten hit in the crossfire. The only logical solution would have been to take me away from the danger zone. I can only speculate that the reason why Nomura was the one she picked was because she was the most expendable at the moment. From what I understood, she is the newest member of the group after Saji and I, but even so she still had more experience than either of us. So it made a little sense that she was the one sent with me instead of Saji. While the fact that Saji had a sacred gear was an advantage, as he could possibly grow rapidly during the course of the battle due to the intense pressure. No matter how I thought about it, that didn't feel right. It was an incredibly risky plan with low a chance of success. It's also quite unlike Keicho to gamble on something like that. With Saji's current skills, he would most likely only get in the way and die. So why didn't she also send him with me instead of Nomura, or send him together with us? Oh shit. Nomura, we need to get back right now. I ran back to the room as fast I could, tracking my way back with the help of the trail of blood on the stone floor left by my previous wound. Emiya-senpai, wait. She called out to me, but I chose to ignore her and go on. If my hunch is correct, Saji probably started fighting that guy out of rage as soon as I went down. While he never had any violent outbreaks, Saji did seem to have short temper. With how badly rattled he was previously by what Scarin did to those people, he probably only needed one strong push to make him completely flip. A teammate going down in front of him would do it, and if he fought recklessly in his fury against Kuroseiga, chances are that I won't be finding him in one piece. When I saw the metallic door from earlier, I steeled myself for the potential fight that may occur behind it. I kicked it open and scanned the room, only to realize that it was empty. Looking around, I noticed there were a few differences from before. Many of the walls were cracked, indication that something crashed into them hard with a lot of force. There were several deep slash marks in the walls. Judging by their cut, they seemed to be made by a sword, but the sheer size of each one didn't match up with the sword that Kuroseiga was carrying. On the floor were several craters, many of which were letting off smoke and heat. It was a sign that they were recently made, probably by an explosion or fire-related attack. Sections of the walls and ceiling had crumbled apart, turning into debris and forming small piles. The only good part is that the debris now covered the bodies of the victims, keeping them out of sight. Even though their presence didn't disturb me, that didn't mean that I enjoyed looking at them. A sudden explosion got my attention. It came from the other side of the room, the same direction that Kurosega arrived from earlier. I dashed quickly towards the source, quickly finding another metal door and once again forcing it open. I surveyed the area and took a moment to understand where I was. The new room was several times bigger than the previous one, reminiscent to an arena of sorts, as there was a ring-like floor several meters down. I approached the railing to get a better look. When I touched it, someone reached out, grabbing my wrist. My head instantly turned around, preparing to punch the intruder. A lump of air got stuck in my throat when I saw who it was. Saji was lying down on his bottom. His clothes looked like they had gone through a shredder. His left hand was hanging down lifelessly to his side, obviously bent and broken in many places. The black gauntlet on it appeared to have been shattered, and almost all his visible body parts were covered in deep dark bruises. "Emiya-senpai, you can't just..." Nomura froze as she caught up to me and saw who was holding my wrist. Her face went pale, eyes widening in shock. "Saji-senpai. Why the hell did you come back?" Saji asked me with a strained and pained voice, his bruise-covered arm trembling as it held my wrist. "And Nomura, you were supposed to get him out of here." The small pawn shuddered in shame in front of her school senior. No doubt she wasn't prepared to see such an angry expression from him. It also didn't help that the bruises on his face made him look far more menacing than normal. "Get the hell out of here," he snapped at us, his voice filled indignation and anger, but this was different from the anger he showed during our small quarrels. This time it was serious. I opened my mouth to talk to him, but stopped when another explosion occurred, grabbing my attention. I shook him off and turned back to the railing to look over it. My master and the others were fighting Kurosega in the middle of the room. From the sidelines, Kaichu, Kusaka, and Hanakai were all bombarding him with their respective forms of magic. My master was unleashing torrents of raging water on him, waves so violent that it made Stormy Sea look like a bathtub. The two bishops, on the other hand, were blasting him large fireballs that put any modern flamethrower to shame. The blonde stray didn't seem to panic or react at all to the magic launched at him, the opposite in fact. His eyes were half closed, an expression of boredom was etched on his face as the onslaught of fire and water were approaching him at an alarming rate. He made no gesture to dodge them, and instead drew his katana forward towards the incoming attacks. An eerie teal light enveloping the blade of the black katana as the man simply swung it upwards as the demonic attacks were about to hit him. 1 second the attacks were about to hit him, then in the next they split apart, passing by his left and right sides. Not even a drop of water or a spark of fire touching him. A loud explosion was heard as the blasts crashed into the walls behind him. The most that offensive did was make his hair dance violently from the gushing wind of the explosion. His expression remained unchanged, the silent boredom still present on his face as he narrowed his eyes on his opponents. "Haven't you learned already?" Kurosega asked his attackers in a halfway exasperated tone. His eyes still showing nothing but boredom, yet he never let any of them out his sight. "Your attacks are useless against me, you're just wasting time and stamina fighting like that." A smile that made me shiver soon formed on his face. A smooth change in his body's stance, a small feral gleam appeared in his eyes, and the blade of his katana began to glow once more. "This is how you attack." 3 swings were done and 3 streams of teal energy erupted from his weapon, surging forth towards them. They all raised their hands at once and 3 magical seals appeared, the completed magic forming barriers in front of them, ready to block the incoming attacks. The opposing forces violently clashed against one another. The 3 women shrieking as the strength of the blasts were slowly pushing them backwards. Cracks began forming across the seals of their barriers, starting from the center and slowly spreading all over. Like a rock crashing through a window, the barriers shattered. The first one to fall was the one that belonged to Kusaka, the blast hitting her straight on, sending her flying into a wall. A big section of the wall cracked upon her strong impact, a mouthful of blood escaped through her lips as the pieces of the shattered wall fell around her. Next was Hanakai. As her barrier broke, the attack hit the right side of her body, shredding a rather large section of her clothes and revealing her pale white skin. The force of the attack sent her spinning into the air and landing close to Kusaka. However, unlike her friend, she hit her left temple against the wall, her eyes rolling upwards as she lost consciousness. My master somehow managed to keep standing until the very last second. Her barrier only shattered when the attack finally lost its power. She was still on her legs, her hands still extended forward but shaking violently. I could see steam rising from them, and her breathing was heavy and uneven. Her legs finally gave in as she fell to her knees, quickly used her hands to sustain herself, trying her best not to fall face flat on the ground. Dozens of bullets of sweat were present on her face. Her heavy breathing and shaking was visibly increasing, but her eyes were still locked onto her man in front of her. Is that all, little Miss Pure Blood? An arrogant smirk was present on the stray's face as he glared at his fallen opponent. No comments were heard from her, a dreadful silence was filling the room. Or it was until a high-pitched battle cry was heard from behind the blonde stray. Kurosage casually raised his sword behind his neck, sparks flying around him as his dark blade clashed against another. You know, that might have actually worked if you didn't scream like an idiot and literally give away your position. He commented as the edges of his eyes drifted to the woman behind him. Shinra-senpai was trying hard to push her naginata forward and stab the man, but his stance was unfazed. An irritated scowl was present on her face as she saw that her attack was useless. Then how about this? Completely ignoring the previous advice of the enemy, a new person shouted as she quickly approached the left side of the swordsman. A small glimpse of light flashed as Meguri drew her katana from her scabbard and aimed for Kurosage. Once again he didn't seem to acknowledge the approaching attack as a danger to him. He stared at it uninterestedly as it was quickly making its way to his unguarded left side. The blade was closing in fast, it looked like it would be Meguri's victory. He couldn't use his sword to deflect the slash as it was still busy blocking our queen's naginata. A dull sound filled the room as Meguri's katana made contact with Kurosage's body, but no blood was drawn, no flesh was sliced, and not even his clothes were cut. We all stared in disbelief as he caught the sharp katana in between his thumb, index, and middle fingers, completely locking Meguri in place like a vice. An arrogant smirk formed on his face as he glared at the twin-tailed redhead. I'd say that's a 9 out of 10 for effort, but power and technique-wise it would be around a 5. The man had all the reason to show a little arrogance. Blocking the strike of a naginata with only a single arm isn't something anyone can do. The weapon has the advantage of momentum and crushing force built up from its swing, while utilizing the body weight and strength of the two-arm grip of its wielder. Catching a blade isn't an easy task as well. While I heard of sword catching techniques, they usually require the use of 2 hands. Here he caught it with his only 3 fingers, as if for a second he replaced them with 2 industrial compressors. Shooting them out instantly, catching the blade between them, and locking it in place. My eyes were locked on his unmoved form. He was standing while still holding both girls at bay without displaying any effort in the process. His cocky smile suddenly vanished, his eyes drifted upwards as a shadow began covering his still locked form. A few meters in the air, Yura was descending right towards his open back. An angry frown was present on her face. Her hands were gripping a large industrial metal pipe, the kind that is used in plumbing systems. Perhaps she found it lying around here. This was it. Both his left and right arms were busy holding off Meguri and Shinra-senpai. If he were to try using either of them to block Yura, that will leave him open for our queen or knight to give him a lethal blow. Perhaps this was their strategy all along. Fighting him separately would have been pointless, so they intended to group up and leave him without anything room to block or dodge with. They could do it, or at least that was what I thought until I saw the flash of teal light glowing from the dark as midnight blade. A cold chill ran down my spine as the glow intensified, completely covering the katana. A feral smile formed on the man's face as the surge of light seemed to explode around him like a geyser, just as Yura was about to strike the nape of his neck with the metal pipe. 3 high-pitched screams echoed through the room aloud as the light somehow repelled them and sent everyone crashing in opposite directions. The stray devil snickered as he saw the end result of his technique. He didn't waste any time and dashed forward to take out his stunned opponents. The first target was Meguri. The moment she comprehended what had just happened was the same moment that the stray was already right next to her. She tried using her katana to protect herself, but Kurosage took that luxury away from her. With a single swing of his sword he completely shattered her blade, making Meguri's eyes go wide with shock. Her reaction was cut short, however, as the very next moment he proceeded to elbow her right shoulder. The first thing that was heard was the loud sound of something cracking. The next noise that followed was the pain-filled scream of our knight. Meguri's arm dangled freely from her broken shoulder. But the cries of pain only lasted for a few moments as Kurosage then grabbed her by the head and threw her towards a nearby wall. A sickening thud was heard as she hit it, knocking her out and thus silencing her. His eyes next landed on Yura, who was trying to get back up on her feet. Just like Meguri, she took notice of the stray far too late, but unlike in Meguri's case, he didn't go for the shoulder. Instead he went for her legs, smashing the hilt of his katana into her left knee. Like a broken record repeating the same track, a familiar scene was once again played. A loud cracking sound was heard, followed by Yura's pain-filled screams, and ending with her getting sent crashing into a nearby wall, incapacitating her. His eyes landed now on his last moving target. Shinra-senpai managed to collect herself in the time it took him to finish the other two. The vice president assumed her battle stance once more, but was trembling while doing so. Despite her fear, however, that didn't stop her from raising her naginata and charging towards Kurosage. The apprehension on her face was apparent, yet a burning rage could be seen in her eyes. No doubt that what Kurosage had done to her friends moments ago infuriated her immensely. The two queens' weapons collided, sparks flying around on contact, their faces mere inches away from the other. One was trying to maintain her calm and not give in to her rage, the other was grinning like a child who just found a new toy. The deadlock broke. Shinra-senpai began thrusting her naginata forward at an alarming speed, aiming straight for her opponent's vitals. However, blood never flew in the air, only the sparks of Kurosage's katana blocking each of her strikes with ease. I could tell just by looking, he wasn't being serious at all. The difference was obvious from the amount of effort both parties displayed during their fight. Shinra-senpai was struggling, yet Kurosage appeared rather impassive. However, what truly gave it away though was the way he held his katana. The type he was using was one best used with both hands, but all this time he only needed to use only one to handle everyone. A sound similar to glass shattering pierced my ears. The blade of the naginata had broke apart, the pieces spinning in the air while Shinra-senpai's face had a stunned expression. Kurosage caught one of the shattered pieces in his mouth before shifting to his right and dashing upwards. His open hand found its way around our queen's throat, slamming her hard against a nearby wall. Her eyes closed tightly from the pain and shock of the unexpected impact. The sudden blow both disoriented her and sent her reeling. The swordsman let go of her throat, quickly grabbing both her wrists and pushed them to the wall right above her head. He took the piece of blade that he was keeping in his mouth and stabbed it through our queen's wrists, pinning her to the wall. The black-haired beauty let out cries of agony as he did so. "Man," he finally spoke, ignoring the painful gasps and weak struggles of Shinra-senpai. "Queens these days are so damn stupid. They are given all the traits of a knight, rook, and bishop, yet they always focus on only one trait while ignoring the rest. Tisk. Seriously, what a waste. Leave her alone, you monster." My master's scream got the stray devil's attention. All this time he had ignored her to focus on the others, perhaps thinking she wasn't anything worth worrying about. When he turned around, his eyes were wide in shock as he was greeted by a giant serpent made entirely out of water which hit him straight on, swallowing him in its mouth. Silence filled the room, the massive water beast standing tall and still for over a minute. I looked at my master as she let out a sigh of relief, her body becoming more relaxed, eyes closing behind her glasses. I myself let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding myself. It was a difficult battle, but she did it. She managed to surprise and defeat such a dangerous enemy. While badly injured, everyone was still alive, much to my relief. However, my relief was unfortunately rather short-lived. My nose twitched violently, my eyes instantly drifting back to the serpent. It began shaking, a large bump forming in the pit of its stomach, the area growing quickly with each passing second. Small holes soon formed in the serpent, teal lights erupting from within them. Like a plastic balloon that was filled with far too much air, the serpent exploded. Water scattered everywhere throughout the room for a few seconds. As the violent sudden rain subsided, a lone figure was left sitting where the serpent was previously. He was drenched from head to toe in water, his hair now down and messy, an annoyed expression present on his face. "Trying to drown me, really?" Kurosage sighed with a scowl, running his open hand through his hair, his eyes twitching as he kept trying to arrange his hair in vain. "Oh damn. Do you know how long it takes to style my hair?" Completely ignoring his flippant comments, my master took a step backwards. Preparing to fight him once more, but she was only lying to herself. She couldn't win, and she knew it far too well. She knew it, and it completely terrified her. She was barely standing on her two shaking legs as it were, biting her lower lip in sheer frustration. Magic seals appeared on her hands once again. Water in the form of various animals started manifesting around her, no doubt preparing to assault Kurosage once more. The man in question, however, didn't give her any chance to let the water animals she made attack him. He simply let go of his katana. As the distance between it and the ground was shortening, he pulled his right leg back and in a flash he kicked the hilt of the sword. The katana shot straight like a bullet towards my master. A breathless gasp escaped from my king's mouth as the blade pierced her in the stomach and sent her flying. The brute force of the impact caused her to crash into the wall. The only reason why the sword didn't completely pass through her body was because the katana's tsuba was caught by her flesh. Her legs lost all strength and fell down on her knees, her cheeks swelling suddenly. A painful cough together with a large amount of blood escaped her mouth. Her breathing turned erratic, hands trembling as she tried to grab the handle of the sword. A wailing screech was heard the moment she touched it. No doubt moving the sword in her wound only made the pain even more unbearable than it already was. The attack and the agony caused by it broke her concentration, the water animals losing their form and breaking apart into mere puddles of water. A sadistic laugh made by the stray devil got her attention. The enemy was now in front of her, grabbing both her wrists and tightening his grip around them. The sound of her bones snapping was heard before being followed by even more screams of excruciating pain. A feral and creepy smile was present on Kurosage all the while he did this. The indifference he showed when he decimated the others was gone, all that was left is the disturbed smile on his face. Why don't you just sit there like a proper little princess until I fix my hair? I hit my limit. This ends now. My voice may have appeared calm to others, but it was only masking the deep rage I felt as I clenched my teeth and fists. I tried to walk forward, but someone was still holding onto my wrist. My eyes drifted at the badly injured pawn. Saji. They won't beat him. No damn it, I'm not that stupid. His face was cringing, tears forming around the corners of his eyes. No doubt he was in great pain from the injuries he sustained, and moving around like this only made things worse for him. But at least some of us were supposed to escape. I don't know, call for help or something, but not rush back here like an idiot. So that's why he was so adamant of me leaving. Truth to be told, it was actually a good idea, but unfortunately I couldn't go back now. There was only one thing I could do. I have to fight him. Keikaichu is high-class pure-blood devil, and Shinra Senpai is a queen piece. Even with their help they couldn't injure him. He snapped at me, his voice in between anger and pain, if not both of them. You on the other hand are a freshly reincarnated pawn with a pair of swords. You will get killed. Better me than someone else. I admitted dryly. As much as I wanted to contradict him, I didn't do it since he was right. I will fight. If it seems that I can't win no matter what I do, take everyone else and get out of here. I understood as I saw Kurosage fight. His strength, speed, and technique outclassed mine by several levels. Worse, he hasn't even gotten serious yet. I'm not sure if I can even stall him, let alone win, but if I can at least make sure that the others are safe, then that's enough for me. Nomura, I called out, getting my junior's attention as she was still busy trying to help Saji. Her eyes were filled with nothing but sorrow and despair over what she saw just happen to our master and other comrades. Take the first chance you see and get the injured to safety. She stared at me for a few moments and nodded reluctantly. I then changed my attention to the blonde pawn, and my fist tightened. Saji, you may not have a good impression of me, but please believe in me. I won't just sit around and let someone die. I gave them one final look before I climbed to the railing. Both of them were looking at me with eyes that were screaming, "You're insane, stop it," but they understood that there wasn't any other choice. I took a glance down to the ground below. I sure was in a high place up. I took a deep breath as I leaned my foot against the wall under the railing on the other side. I descended. I didn't know who designed this place, but I was grateful for the architect who was in charge, since he made the walls slightly curved and not perfectly straight. Because of that I could slide my way down and not fall like an idiot. I was a few meters above my master and her tormentor. I focused all the strength in my legs, pushing as hard as I could against the wall and launching myself towards my target. As Kurosage was busy fixing his hair, he took notice of me, his face filled with surprise. He was open, presently missing his sword. I had to take advantage of this chance no matter what. I recalled it all in my mind, remembering every step of the process and sensation. I reached deep down to the power inside me. The image of a card depicting an archer aiming towards the sky flashed through my mind. Include. I shouted as I extended my hands, the twin blades appearing in them. I aimed the tips towards the stray devil's open vitals. While he appeared stunned for a brief moment, his eyes quickly flashed and his laid-back demeanor vanished. He pointed his hand towards my master, the teal light enveloping his katana still stabbed in my master. The katana flashed in a powerful light, far too powerful for my eyes to resist. I blinked. The next thing I heard was the sound of metal hitting other metal. I opened my eyes and immediately cursed myself for blinking. Kurosega's smug smile was in full view as our swords were pressed against one another. Oh, he whistled excitedly as his eyes met mine. Look who's back in the game. Though attacking like that was a bit reckless. Well, I wasn't the one who was busy with his hair. I commented, somewhat irritated by his words. He was taking the whole situation way too casually in my opinion, and it was starting to rub me the wrong way. While vanity is pretty common among devils, I didn't do it just so I could look good. If I let my hair hang like that, it would have only gotten in my way, reducing the area of my eyesight. He calmly explained with a shrug as his eyes trailed on my weapons. Nice swords, by the way. I never fought against falchions before now that I think about it. The grip on his katana tightened. He broke our stance, sending me back a few steps. You know, I was pretty sure you were down for the count. A small chuckle escaped his lips. How's the chest feeling? I narrowed my eyes at him, my swords ready for any sudden movement. A lot better, that's for sure. It's a bit itchy where you cut it if I had to complain. Honestly, I would apologize, but you were the one that jumped in front of my swing. The amused chuckle he was displaying and way he talked to me made me feel like we were two buddies discussing something trivial, not two enemies talking about matters of life and death. My teeth clenched hard, a snort exited my mouth as I wasn't enjoying how he was treating the current situation. The swing, which was aimed at my comrade, might I add. He looked at me for a few seconds and raised his hands in a defensive manner. I don't know if it will change anything at this point, but that swing was only meant to lightly cut him, not lethally injure him. The fact that you stood in front of him put you in the danger zone. If you had just stood still, you wouldn't have been cut like that. I was surprised my jaw didn't drop when I heard that. I wanted to retort and call bullshit, but after thinking about it for a second, I realized what he is true. The cut was indeed deep, but it should have been much deeper if not straight out cut me in half. If the stray really wanted to slash Saji up, he could have easily done so at any time. From where he stood, the reach of his sword would have only been enough to cut him a little, but not lethally injure him. The fact that I stepped in front of Saji, and thus closer into his sword's reach, was what made me receive such a huge wound instead. Wait. Something's not right here. If that was truly what happened back then, this only raises one critical question. Why would you do that? Was there any reason for him to do that? Showing off the difference in strength? Perhaps trying to instill fear into us? If he was going to kill us in the first place, was there really any reason to do that? Maybe to torture us, but he seemed legitimately disgusted by Scaran before, or was that just because he himself was targeted? He stared silently at me for a few moments as his expression became unreadable, and then narrowed into a frown. Who knows? He closed his eyes and shrugged his shoulders. Honestly, you should be worrying about more important things right now. He raised his katana and took a stance for battle, his eyes sharp like those of a predator. I followed suit and prepared myself, gaining a raised eyebrow from Kurosega in response. Guess you're a bit of an amateur. That form you got there really sucks. Single quote, single quote. I somehow couldn't take any of his cheeky remarks and let out a complaint to his comment in response. If you don't like it, then go somewhere else to find a proper swordsman. My eyes briefly darted around the room. Good. Nomura managed to take Kaichu and the others away to safety while I kept talking to this guy. Now I can concentrate on my fight without worrying about them. Maybe some other time. He chuckled dryly as he raised his katana to his shoulder level. For now, I want to see what you're made of. The floor under his feet crumbled as he rushed towards me, his black katana aiming for my chest. In a moment he would stab me. Or so it seemed to him. Mere inches away from my skin, I blocked his blade with Bakuya and swung Kansho down on him to attack. His eyes widened momentarily, an expression of surprise took over his face as he tried to avoid the blade. He wasn't entirely successful, however, as the tip of my sword cut his cheek. He jumped a few feet backwards, placing his free hand where he was cut. His surprised expression further seemed to increase as he stared at the blood on his fingers. A pained frown took over him, his eyes cringing, teeth clutched strongly. Holy element. No. The pain's similar, but it's clearly different. He was silent, as he was analyzing what just happened. A euphoric smile suddenly crept over his face. Now this is interesting. I don't know what those swords are made of, but they are no toy, that's for sure. There's no way normal weapons can bypass my rook trait like that. I guess you will be a bit more entertaining than the others. He wiped away the trail of blood with his thumb, and then began shifting his weight on his right leg. Kurosega's unused hand now finding its way onto the hilt of the katana, taking a two-handed grip. The only proper thing to do is show some seriousness as well, I suppose. He dashed and aimed his blade for my chest. I put my swords up to block it, only to find it impossible to do so. The strike sent me crashing towards the wall. Damn it. I should have ended things when he only using one arm. Now the present situation had only gotten grimmer than before. Using my right foot as a brake, I managed to slow myself down, stopping right before hitting the wall, but I had no time to rest. I quickly bent my neck to the right, my eyes drifting at the blade that just stabbed itself right where my head was previously. Kurosega's face was in front of my eyes, his feral smile making me feel very uncomfortable as he stared at me. I raised Kansho and Bakuya and swung both in a crossing motion towards his throat. He used the wall as support and pushed himself backwards with his leg. I did the same and went after him. Since his physical power was much greater than my own, blocking his strikes would prove difficult. However, I couldn't risk letting him take the offensive, so I took the initiative to control the flow of combat. I aimed for different parts of his body, the heart, throat, liver, and eyes. Hoping that at least one of my attacks would hit, I failed. Each time I tried to strike him, he blocked me with ease. As our swords clashed, we ended up locking our together once more in a stalemate. He delivered a swift kick to my ribs. I grit my teeth as I felt something crack in my body. The pain made my stance weaken, giving him the chance to break our deadlock, making me stumble across the ground for a few meters. When the bumpy ride was over, I shook my head to get rid of any dizziness, but immediately found myself rolling away to avoid a stab from Kurosega and heading to a nearby wall. As he chased after me, I ran up against the wall and used it to launch myself towards him. Grinning, he dodged my strike by Kansho, and blocked the attack of Bakuya with his sword. The teal light was starting to glow once again from his blade. The explosion of light he made freezing me, a chilling sensation pervading my body, the sensation akin to walking naked in a snow field on a freezing winter night. Was this feeling what had made the others tremble earlier? It was like the feeling was engraved into my body as soon as the light hit me. I could tell that no change in temperature had taken place, and yet my body was shaking. As if an icy wave of dread engulfed me, locking my body and giving the same reactions of freezing. Damn, my hands were shivering violently and I couldn't hold my blades properly. I had to do something before it fully hinders me. Kurosega didn't seem too content to let me figure things out as he closed in on me once again. Quietly, the curtain is cut down. A blue flame at the dawn of awakening. He and I froze in place as my cell phone began playing its ringtone. I can't believe I actually forgot to turn off the damn thing when I got here. Trying to ignore the song playing from my cell phone, I looked curiously at Kurosega, who was just standing in the same place, a confused expression present on his face. Aren't you going to pick that up? How I resisted the urge to facepalm myself at that moment was beyond me. You serious? We're in the middle of a life and death battle, and you're going to let me pick up my phone? He blinked a few times and shrugged his shoulders. It might be important, you know. It's kind of late, so I doubt someone would call you just for some small talk. Single quote. On one hand, he did make a solid point. It was fairly late in the night and I doubt someone would call me at this hour just for some small talk, as he said. On the other hand, however, it could all be a trap to drop my guard and strike me down. How do I know you won't attack me? An annoyed snort escaped his lips. Hey, I may be a little psychotic from time to time, but I can cut a guy some slack when I feel like it. My still shivering hand reached for my pocket. While it may be a little risky, if I could buy even a few seconds to get rid of this dreadful sensation and come up with a way to counter him, then I have to take it. Hello, Emiya. An all too familiar voice made my eardrum ring in pain. Mitsuzuri, I asked her, my voice in between shock and concern from the way she was screaming. What happened? Are you hurt? What? No. The tone of her voice was making me feel like I had just asked something stupid. But I will be dead on Monday if you don't help me. I really didn't understand what was going on, but I had to make her give me a proper explanation. Calm down and tell me what happened. That idiot brother of mine spilled a box of juice on the table and grabbed the first piece of paper he could find to clean it, and that piece of paper happened to be my homework. Please, I beg you, let me copy yours. I don't know when exactly my trembling stopped, but it was surprisingly replaced by a very violent twitch in my left eye. I frowned as I rubbed the bridge of my nose and groaned. Single quote. You called me at this hour for this. But it's an emergency. Perhaps due to the recent revelations of my family and drama of being turned into a devil, my perception of what an emergency is has changed, but I honestly can't help but feel a certain level of stupidity in this conversation. Single quote. Well, I guess this is what happens when you leave your homework lying around. You know, I really should just hang up on you. What? Don't be like that. Please, I really need your help. While I couldn't see her, something told me that she was making a face similar to a sad puppy. I sighed in defeat. Fine, there is no need to go into a panic attack on me. I will give you my homework, but be sure to not write it word for word or the teacher will figure out you copied it. Really? Thanks a lot, Emiya, you're the best. I'll treat you to something good for this. I let out a tired sigh once again. It felt somewhat reassuring that Mitsuzuri was still the same lively girl that I have known since middle school. It's okay, there's no need for you to thank me. Just go to sleep and rest for tomorrow. Will do. Good night. Single quote closing square bracket. Bye. I sighed as I closed my phone. At least my shaking is gone. I looked at Kurosega, the later twirling his katana around his hand like a parade stick to pass the time. I couldn't help but feel really awkward about what just happened. Sorry about that. He stopped spinning his katana, an amused smirk trailing on his lips. Nah, I had my share of relationships, so I can somewhat relate. Huh, my eyes going wide confused at his statement. What do you mean by that? Huh, he did a similar expression to my own, as if trying to emulate me. That was your girlfriend on the phone, right? I think my mind stopped working for a few seconds before it finally rebooted and acknowledged what he just said. Immediately I started raising and waving my hands to clarify. What? No. Mitsuzuri and I are just close friends, we're not like that. Seriously, the idea of Mitsuzuri and me dating as a couple. Who would believe something like that? I mean, I don't dislike her, but I doubt she sees me as anything more than a friend and rival in archery. Plus, she's not exactly what I would call the textbook definition of girly, though I still thought she was rather pretty. Thinking on it, I have to admit, she did start developing more feminine traits since we started high school. Especially as she began to fill out in certain areas, especially her brea. I slapped my face, getting rid of any unnecessary thoughts and getting my mind back into focus regarding the life and death battle at hand. Your reaction is telling me otherwise, but I'll leave it at that for now. He shrugged his shoulders and chuckled. Battle time. He reassumed his position, his stance appearing more solid than before, his orange eyes turning slightly feral, and the teal light of demonic energy enveloping his katana once again. He was being serious. This time he wasn't going to hold back and will come at me with all he had. I could feel it, a tingling sensation in my skin. It was telling me to run, telling me that I can't win against him at my current level. But I couldn't do that. He may appear as an easygoing individual from our interactions, but there is also a certain level of cruelty in him. I saw it when he crushed Kaichu's wrists, the gleam of excitement in his eyes, the snicker on his face. The way he enjoyed making her feel helpless. If I try to run away, there's no telling what could happen. Perhaps he may let me go and escape, but what if he goes after the others? I can't let that happen, I refuse to let that happen. I need more power. I didn't have time to test it before, but it's the only thing that I could think of. She told me of the conditions, requiring either her approval or to be in enemy territory. She wasn't precise if enemy territory referred to being near an enemy in general or a territory that is a specified enemy zone towards devils, like a church. But I didn't have time to waste by second-guessing myself. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. I recalled my little lesson regarding the evil piece's powers. Promotion Queen. I shouted with all might, my voice echoing through the room. Kurosega took notice, and prepared himself. His eyes were analyzing my every move, his pose showing that he was ready to pounce on me at any moment. I slowly opened my eyes and looked my hands, gripping hard on the handles of my swords. I could feel it. Nothing had changed. I felt the same. I didn't feel anything different. It didn't work. I didn't promote, but that didn't make any sense. Kaichu told me that promotion is instant, like flipping a switch, it wasn't anything complicated and even the weakest pawn is able to do it. That was the whole beauty of promotion, giving even a pawn with limited physical or magical abilities the chance to power up and overcome obstacles that would have normally been impossible for them. She told me that the only downside of promoting was the physical strain that would be put on the body, but that's it. There shouldn't be any reason why I couldn't promote to a different piece. Could it be that my body isn't able to take the strain and that's why the promotion isn't working? Damn, I didn't have time to waste. If a queen is out of the question, I had to choose something else. Promotion knight. Nothing. Promotion rook. Again, it failed. Promotion bishop. My final shot. A failure same as the previous attempts. I ran out of choices. I couldn't promote to any of the other pieces. The frustration I was feeling made my teeth clench so hard that it felt like they would crack, and it seemed like I wasn't the only one who wasn't happy about what happened. Is this supposed to be some kind of joke? Kurosega's smile was no more, only an annoyed frown was present on his face. Because if it is, I'm sure as hell not laughing. Instantly he appeared at my right side, shifting his weight on his leg and aimed for my heart. I blocked him with my swords, only to find myself shooting up suddenly in the air and then into a wall. A pain-filled gasp escaped my mouth on impact, a cracking sound circulating in my body. I tried to ignore the pain and regroup, but Kurosega didn't give me any opportunity to do so. He was once again near me, this time kicking me in the thigh. The feeling of my muscles being ripped made my whole body spasm. He grabbed me by the head and bashed it against the wall. Then he pulled me back and repeated the process again multiple times. I lost count after the 5th time. My perception of the world messed up as he pushed my skull into the old and fickle wall. Everything was spinning, left felt like right and up felt like down. Not giving Ant time to let my senses return naturally, he strengthened his grip around my head and with one swift motion slammed my whole body on the floor. My grip on my swords loosened, dropping them as soon as I hit the ground. The impact, strong and painful as it was, caused my body to somehow bounce back up in the air like a ball, but I didn't get to spend too much time there as Kurosega jabbed his elbow in my gut. His blow sent me crashing down into the ground once more. Even though my body felt like it was just hit by a runaway truck. I tried getting up, using my arms to push myself, but stopping when I felt my cheeks swell suddenly. A mouthful of blood and bile rushed out through my lips. I couldn't breathe properly, the sensation of choking on my own blood overwhelmed me, the taste of copper and bile. Both these things combined with my dizziness from the previous hits were making everything in my mind spin. I felt a hand run through my hair, Kurosega pulling it as he made me look him straight in his orange eyes. Look, kid. The stare he was giving me was one devoid of compassion, but at the same time devoid of any ill intention. It was just simply pity. You tried your best, but this is as far as you go. You have potential as a fighter, I'll give you that. But you are far too green to beat me. Just close your eyes and go to sleep. It will ease the pain. He said, letting go of my head, and turned around. I didn't realize it until he let go, but his hand was what kept my body from falling onto the ground. Damn, my body felt so heavy, everything was spinning, and my ears were ringing. Somehow his suggestion sounded so good right now. I felt so tired, even though I didn't want to. My eyes were slowly closing, it was a struggle to even try to keep myself from passing out. Desperately I did my best to hang on, to keep the thread of my consciousness awake. I could only stare at Kurosega as he started moving. I could hear the tapping of his shoes against the ground as he walked further away from me. He stopped midway the distance between Kaichu and I. He looked back at me with a tired, almost resigned expression. Just like that, let it go. When you wake up you will be a free man. He turned and resumed walking. And your little master will be gone. ... Something in me felt like it snapped. My eyes were wide open, my teeth grinding against each other. I didn't have the luxury of passing out now. If I did that, Sona will die. I can't allow that. Searching for the strength to move, I pushed myself up with all the power I could muster. I somewhat managed to lift myself and sit on my knees, but wasn't able to stand up properly. I grabbed my swords and tried using them as support to further push myself up, but even with them I couldn't stand up properly. Oh, screw it. I pulled my hand to the side, taking aim at the man walking away, and threw Kansho. The blade was spinning fast towards him like a boomerang, the sound of it cutting through the air echoed across the room. As it was closing in on Kurosega, I couldn't help but notice a mark on my extended hand, turquoise in color with a form similar to a system of pipes. I chose to ignore it and focus on my enemy. The stray devil stopped walking and twisted around, blocking the incoming sword and repelling it. Kancho went flying back towards me and landed down right in front of me. What truly shocked me wasn't the fact that he managed to stop the attack, but rather what happened when he did. When he blocked it, he was actually pushed back a few inches. I barely made him flinch earlier when we crossed swords, and at that time I was using all the strength I could muster into my strikes. And yet, this time when I threw my sword it had enough power to push him back. You know, he said staring down on me, his expression a mixture of surprise and annoyance. While I should applaud your fighting spirit, please just stop it. We both know that you can't win, even if you were to promote yourself into a queen that still wouldn't be enough to beat me. I inhaled a large amount of air into my lungs, forcing myself back up on my feet, and staring him down once more. Even if I can't promote, I won't just sit by and let someone die in front of me. Tisk. You're an idiot, just like I used to be. He rubbed the back of his head and sighed. Very well, since you have no intention of giving up, I will fight you till the end. He pointed his katana to his side, a teal light appearing once more, his legs slowly starting to move forward. I managed to brace myself, the dizziness and puking sensation reduced. Gripping Bakuya in my hand, I began walking slowly, picking up Kancho along the way. My body felt so heavy and yet I still marched on towards my opponent, both of us slowly picking up the pace as we approached the other. The first 5 steps were difficult, the next 5 felt smoother. The steps that followed after that felt lighter, the heaviness of the previous wounds I suffered felt like it was lifted by the time we crossed swords. The clashing of steel began once more. When my blades got close to him, he would push them back. When he'd thrust I'd block and endure. My teeth were grinding against each other as I tried to muster the power to overcome him, the taste of blood and bile still lingering in my mouth all the while. Although I knew I was fighting a battle I had little chance of winning, I still held my ground. My muscles felt like there was electricity running through them, making me feel as if I could go beyond my limits. I pushed my swords forward, the turquoise mark appearing on both my arms this time, glowing more intensely than it did before. Kurosega's eyes widened as my swords were slowly pushing him back, his eyebrows forming in an annoyed frown. His right hand let go of his katana, pulling it back and tightening his fist. Faster than I could react he punched me in the face, his fist burying itself deep in my cheek, 2 or 3 of my teeth cracking from the blow. Out of the corner of my eye I could see him smirking at me. His smirk dropped though when he saw that I was pushing his fist back with my face. In the reflection of Kancho I could see the same mark from before appear on my face this time, right where he punched me. If he wanted to brawl, 2 could play at that game. I moved my leg and kicked him in the ribs. A painful grunt escaped his mouth, a surprised expression appearing on his face, as the end of my shoe buried itself into his stomach. A loud snapping noise could be heard in the room. "T the hell?" he asked as blood erupting through his teeth, letting go of his fist and grabbing my face, he pushed me to the side, my body sent tumbling to the ground. I stabbed Bakuya in the ground to stop my fall, spinning around it and pulling myself up. "What kind of game are you playing, taking a beating like that and tricking me that you can't promote so you can catch me off guard?" Huh, what was he talking about? I wasn't even sure if you could promote without declaring it, and I didn't even think about promoting at the time. Although promotion could explain why I suddenly had more strength, but I was sure I failed. But if I didn't promote, then what did I do? I brushed those thoughts aside as I heard my opponent spit out a mouthful of blood, wiping the remnants off his lips with his sleeve. Spotting an opening I dashed forward and aimed for his neck. He blocked me, but was slightly pushed back. I circled around him and tried to stab him in the back, but he flipped his katana around and placed the blade behind back, blocking the attack. The teal aura around it intensified, bursting forth towards me, sending me flying back a few meters in the air. My hands began shivering again, but this time I managed to overcome it. He jumped towards me, his katana aimed at my chest. I pushed myself to the side, shielding my vitals with my swords. Sparks almost hit my eyes when he passed me by as his sword ran against mine. As soon as I landed on the ground I leapt straight to where he was about to land. I aimed for his kidneys, but he turned around and deflected my attack with his own. Our battle of life and death intensified. Blocking, parrying, dodging, and countering. My heart beating like a drum as this dance of blades continued, the feeling of electricity surging through my body intensifying with each exchange. For a moment, as I was charging towards him, time seemed to have slowed down. As I tried to overcome my opponent, for an instant everything went black. Multiple images flashed through my mind. The world around me seemed to bend and morph together, colors mixing and intertwining. What was up was now down, and what was left was now right. Everything was like that for a moment, but then it all changed. I somehow found myself in an unknown location. Light was shining through the old windows, traces of dust filling the air, and the smell of oil was present in the room. It was a rather odd scene I was witnessing here, the image of a man sitting on the ground in what appeared an old shed. He was surrounded by all kinds of mundane things like light bulbs, some metal pipes, bolts, and rocks. In the background there were a lot of old pieces of furniture and electric appliances as well. I felt the most unusual sensation when I looked at him. Was it because of the fact that I somehow couldn't see his face? Or was it because he had on his hand the same markings that I had when I fought Kuroseiga? I kept staring at the man, his body tensing and sweating as he kept shifting through objects. With the exception of one or two lucky ones, everything else that passed through his hands would crumble, break, or shatter. I didn't know where I was, who this person was, or why I was even here in the first place, and yet I knew what he was doing. It was the first time I've seen it, but I understood exactly what he was trying to do. He was performing reinforcement, a skill that lets the user analyze the structural composition of an object with the purpose of pushing its basis to the utmost limit, the power to enhance the existence of the target by pouring magical energy into it. Strengthening the item in question, whether it is an object or a person's own body. I could make a blade become sharper, a rock become harder, a body become stronger, and a poison more potent than before. These were just some of the few possibilities that this skill offered me. Now I understand. Each time he was about to lethally injure me, I subconsciously reinforced my body, but I was barely tapping into its full potential. The electric sensation circulating through my body, it was reinforcement. I may have just found a way to flip the tables against Kuroseiga. I grasped the concept, understanding it, the steps and mode of operation invading my mind. I let the sensation surge through my being. I began reinforcing my body completely, going beyond its current limits. I took a second and let myself experience this tense sensation. I could feel almost all of my physical abilities had been augmented, strength to bend steel, endurance to resist powerful attacks, and agility to dodge speeding bullets. His katana was about to pierce my heart. I deflected it with Bakuya, the force of the impact sending his arm to the side, his vitals now wide open. A small smirk formed on my lips. It was time I returned the favor for hurting my comrades.